We are talking about the most recent roster update for the Washington Commanders, as we're going to be looking at the players that have signed to the practice squad. Next, we're going to be talking about the players that are going to be changing their number for this upcoming season. And lastly, we're going to be talking about the details in Terry McLaurin's contract. And so before we jump into it, I first want to remind you to hit that subscribe button, just like Jaden Daniels is going to be hitting Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, Zach Ertz, and many others for multiple touchdowns this upcoming season. And so in exchange for hitting that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Washington Commanders. And so make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Washington Commanders Insider family as we talk nothing but Washington Commanders football. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it as we are talking about the latest roster update with the Washington Commanders. And so at the time of this current recording, there have been 14 players that have been signed to the Washington Commanders practice squad. You can go take a look at this on commanders.com. And this is also too in some other places as well. And so we're going to go over the list. And then next, we're going to talk about the players that I definitely thought the Commanders were going to bring back. And really, what does some of these practice signings mean for the Washington Commanders, maybe moving forward with this roster? And so let's start with the list here. So you have defensive tackle Ricky Barber, you have wide receiver Ja'Cory Brooks, you have tight end Lawrence Cager, defensive tackle Sheldon Day, you have center Michael Dieter, cornerback Antonio Hamilton, you have quarterback Sam Hartman, you have defensive end Jalen Holmes, you have wide receiver Jacoby Jones, you have defensive end TJ Magorinyanga, then you have safety Rob McDaniel, you have guard Timothy McKay, wide receiver Chris Moore, and cornerback Carlin Viggers. And so those are the 14 at the time of this recording that have been signed to the Washington Commanders practice squad. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the next part and just players that I thought the Commanders were going to bring back. And let's start with Antonio Hamilton. And so I talked about him. I thought he should be a player that should be on the practice squad. And I just think that the way this defense is going to operate, really putting its corners on the island, they want corners that are going to be physical and things like that. And so I think that Antonio Hamilton, I thought that he put his best foot forward. This is something that Dan Quinn talked about as well later on in the training camp. And so I definitely think that he's got a chance here. Let's see what happens with the corners and things like that. Hopefully there's no injuries or nobody really gets off to a slow start. But I think it is a good thing to have Antonio Hamilton out there, especially if they end up moving on from maybe one of their corners. And so we talked about that yesterday with Noah Inagami. And so the next player that I thought would come back here was Carlin Viggers. And so I think that Carlin Viggers is a player that they were really high on. And I know he kind of struggled out there in preseason and everything else. And so I just think that that's part of the rookie learning curve. And I think that that's really why you see that just what Trey Amos is doing is really been special so far with the way that he's just come into the league. He's adapted, and I know he hasn't gotten to week one yet, but he just doesn't seem like a rookie. But Carlin Viggers, I think very much he seemed like one, and I think he's a player that definitely has, the skill set to definitely do something here in the National Football League. And so I think that this is one of those signings where, again, you're just looking at the upside here, and I definitely think that Carlin Viggers definitely has the upside for the Commanders. And so next, another player that I definitely expected that they would bring back was Robert McDaniel. I think that he's a player that when you look at him and just the possibility of being a hybrid type of player, a guy that can come down off the safety, play in the box and things like that. Like, I think that that's really what they see with him. Does he get a chance to show that? Let's see what happens. But I think that he's a player that if you're looking at the upside, you want to bring him in and see what he does with the practice squad and things like that. And again, the NFL, it's a very fluid situation. And so things change. You never know. But I definitely think that this was a good signing here for the Washington Commanders as far as bringing him into the practice squad. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about is just really some of the practice squad signings that I think it indicates that the Commanders are definitely wanting to take just more of a look here at the wide receivers. And so when we look at that list and going back to it, you have Jacoby Jones. You also have Ja'Cory Brooks coming in, and Chris Moore. These are three wide receivers that are on the practice squad. And so with Ja'Cory Brooks, I thought that he should have been a player that, look, if you were taking another wide receiver into the season, I thought that he definitely played his way there. I know it wasn't the most consistent all the time, but I thought he was the better out of the wide receivers that were let go. And then, you have Jacoby Jones. I think that he was right there in the running too as well. And Chris Moore is a player that has been with the Commanders. And so I just think that what the Commanders are saying there is that, look, man, there is the possibility that they might have to elevate one of these wide receivers up there, especially with the situation going on with Terry McLaurin, because, I said this in yesterday's show. I think that they definitely should pace him along early on. And so let's see what the rotations and things look like. Also, too, you're going to be starting Jalen Lane. And so hopefully he gets off to a fast start. And if Luke McCaffrey or somebody struggles or Noah Brown goes down, you need to have a wide receiver that you can elevate here, because I'm not sure if you're necessarily going to find one on the free agency list right now that you necessarily like or fits here. And so you want to go with some players that are familiar with your system. And so I think that that's what you see here with these practice signings. And so let's see if any of these players end up getting elevated up off of the practice squad and getting some good snaps here with the team. And so next, I wanted to talk about just the players that are going to be changing their numbers for this upcoming season. And so once again, you guys can head over to commanders.com if you want to go see this. But the first player that is going to be changing his number this season is going to be Marcus Mariota. So it looks like that he is going back to 8. And so I believe that is a number that he has played with before. The next, you have Tyler Owens. And so Tyler Owens is going to be moving to 18. And so he's chosen 18 as his number. Then you have George Fant, who will be wearing 77. And then you have Colson Yankoff, who will be number 80. And then the last notable out of this is Javon Kinlaw will be wearing 99 this upcoming season. And so those are the players that are going to be changing their number for this upcoming season. And so lastly, I wanted to jump into just breaking down the latest on the Terry McLaurin deal. And so remember when we last left off, I said that we would talk about the details of the deal, like once we got the details and everything else. And so there's a couple different sources that you can go and check this out at. One of the sources that I went and looked at here was on Commander's Wire, and it's under this particular article title. I think it's a pretty good piece to take a look at, because within this, you actually have, I believe a writer here for Sports Illustrated in Albert Breer, who breaks down the contract, and really you get a chance to see the details and everything else. It's really a great tweet there. So definitely check this article out and you can see it for yourself. But here's just the base out of this thing. And so the base new money value is actually $87 million over the 3 years. And then when you're looking at the fully guaranteed money for Terry McLaurin, it says that the fully guaranteed money that Terry McLaurin is headed to is $44.65 million. And then as far as the upside of the deal, you're looking at $9.4 million as far as the upside in this contract. And so I wanted to kind of jump into this a little bit more, because I think that this clearly kind of shows us a couple different things. And so first and foremost, initially it was looking like he was going to be at the $32 million base average salary, but I think what that breaks down to with the $87 million is $29 million is your base average salary. And so that's key point number one. And then number two, when you look at the details of this deal, like I said, definitely go check it out. This is very much a deal where Terry McLaurin is betting on himself. And then also, too, this is very much the team saying you have to go out there and prove it. Because when you look at the details of the deal, the performance base is definitely in there, like the catches, the yards, the touchdowns, even the team advancing to the playoffs. Like that is part of like the incentive tied to this deal. And so I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. And so again, I'm betting on Terry McLaurin. And one of the things that he talked about really going into this thing was that, hey, I get all the data points and everything else with wide receivers that, get into their 30s and stuff like that. And he feels like that, look, he still is performing at a high level. He still feels like that he can bring it at a high level. And so again, Terry McLaurin has not done anything that would make you bet against him. And so let's see if he can continue with that type of production, because if he is certainly headed to a nice payday with this contract. And so, I thought that was interesting that Terry McLaurin, ultimately, he's going to be betting on himself with this contract. And then the next thing on this is just looking at the team and how they set this up is just more so like, instead of the team just outright paying him on production, for the seasons ahead, like just up front, it's more of, okay, look, we can't say that you can't get there, but here's the deal. If you can put up the production or whatever the case may be, you are going to get paid here. And so I just thought it was interesting how the team set that up to where it's like, look, if you're going to hit those numbers, you're going to hit those metrics, you absolutely are going to get paid. It's not going to matter that you're, well into your 30s as this deal goes along. And so I like it on both sides. I think Terry McLaurin bets on himself. You have the franchise, they're kind of betting there with the way that this contract is set up. And so you guys let me know in the comments here what you guys are thinking when it comes down to the details of this deal. Was it a solid deal for both sides? Do you think that it was a win-win for Terry McLaurin and the Washington Commanders here moving forward? And also, too, what do you think the season outlook is going to look like for Terry McLaurin? Because I definitely think that the outlook looks very good, because Deebo Samuel has already been on a great just kind of a connection with Jaden Daniels. I haven't really talked about the connection that Jaden Daniels has had with Zach Ertz. That's something that we've talked about several times on this show. And I think that connection is actually going to pick up from last year and actually take a step forward. So I think that that's something that's not talked about nearly enough. And then, when you just look at the fact that there is the potential that if Noah Brown is able to get back to the type of production that we saw last year with no injury, I think he's clearly going to, take a step forward from that. And then you look at Jalen Lane, a rookie that has definitely made some buzz. And I think that he's a guy that gets better as the season goes along. In fact, Dan Quinn had talked about this with Jaden Daniels and then also to Mikey Samra with the ability to course correct. And it sounds like that Jalen Lane could be that guy, because they always talk about how coachable he is, and that if he does make a mistake, you tell him once and he's able to correct that. So I think that indicates to me that Jalen Lane is the type of guy that if he does make a mistake, he's going to course correct immediately. And this is the guy that's going to compete to try to get better. And for Luke McCaffrey, look, he has a golden opportunity. There's so much attention to others on this offense, in the wide receiver room. And then also, too, I think that the running game is going to open up some things. And so Luke McCaffrey, he has a chance to be sneaky good here. Can he step up? Can he be as good as advertised, as they continue to talk about him as a competitor and how he's locked in now, understanding where to be as a wide receiver and things like that. So let's see if he can execute here on Sunday. But I think that Terry McLaurin, I'm betting with Terry McLaurin that he's going to have a good season. But you guys let me know in the comments, and let me know too what you guys are thinking about the practice squad and the updates here around some of these players that have recently been signed to the practice squad. Do you think that these are some players that eventually could see some real snaps for the Washington Commanders on Sunday? And let me know what you guys are thinking about the fresh digits here. Marcus Mariota and Tyler Owens, a couple players that are changing their numbers, along with Javon Kinlaw. So anyway, guys, let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking. And as we always say, go Commanders, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.